They thought she was just another nurse. Quiet. Invisible. The kind of woman who faded into the background of a busy Newark hospital. Commander Hayes didn't even look at her twice when she changed his bag. But when 6 armed terrorists stormed St. Michael's Medical Center and took the entire trauma ward hostage, the Navy SEAL watched in shock as the timid nurse became a ghost, silent, lethal, unstoppable. By the time the FBI's hostage rescue team breached the building, she had already neutralized all 6 hostiles. Alone. With nothing but surgical tools and a past she swore she'd never return to. The rain hammered against the glass doors of St. Michael's Medical Center in Newark, New Jersey, like 1,000 angry fists. Inside the 4th-floor trauma ward, the fluorescent lights buzzed with that headache-inducing flicker only night shift workers truly understand. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and made the ambulance bay doors rattle in their frames. Letitia Decker stood at the nurse's station, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the medication cart she was restocking. She was 27 but looked older. Exhaustion had carved shadows under her dark eyes. Her scrubs hung loose on her small frame like a child playing dress-up. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked the morphine dosages for the 3rd time. "Decker, for God's sake, move faster." The sharp voice of head nurse Barbara Jennings cut through the low murmur of the ward. Barbara was 52, cynical, and moved with the efficiency of someone who had seen it all and liked none of it. She stood with her hands on her hips, glaring at the newest addition to the nursing staff. "I don't pay you to triple-check what the pharmacy already verified. I pay you to get meds in patients and clear beds. You've been here 3 weeks, and you still move like you're afraid the floor will bite you." Letitia nodded, her face flushing crimson. She didn't argue. She never argued. Since arriving at St. Michael's, Letitia had been a ghost. She ate lunch alone in her beat-up Honda Civic in the parking garage. She never joined the other nurses for drinks at O'Malley's bar after shifts. When trauma cases came in, car wrecks, stabbings, gunshot wounds, the gritty stuff, Letitia always faded into the background, handling paperwork or stocking supplies, leaving the blood and chaos to the real nurses. The general consensus among the staff was clear. Letitia Decker was soft. She belonged in a quiet pediatric clinic in the suburbs, not the inner-city meat grinder of a Level 1 trauma center in Newark. "Look at her," whispered Dr. Julian Thorne to a resident near the Keurig coffee machine. Thorne was the attending physician that night. Arrogant, brilliant, Johns Hopkins educated, and possessed of a god complex that barely fit through the double doors. He gestured with his Starbucks travel mug toward Letitia, who was struggling to unlock a supply cabinet with shaking hands. "She's trembling. Literally trembling. If a real bleeder comes in tonight, she'll faint. Mark my words." The resident, a cocky kid named Greg from NYU Medical, chuckled. "Maybe she's just cold, Dr. Thorne." "She's scared," Thorne said dismissively, stirring his coffee. "Some people have the stomach for this work, and some don't. She's prey. In the wild, she'd be eaten in 5 minutes." Letitia heard them. She had ears like a bat, though she pretended not to. She finally got the cabinet open, grabbed a box of gauze pads, and hurried toward bed 4 to dress a minor laceration on a construction worker's hand. As she worked, her hands did tremble slightly. But if anyone had looked closely, really closely, they would have noticed something strange. The tremble wasn't fear. It was restraint. When the construction worker, a burly man named Mike with a thick Brooklyn accent, winced as she cleaned the wound with iodine, Letitia's voice changed. It dropped an octave, becoming soothing, almost hypnotic. "Deep breath, Mike. Look at the wall. Count the tiles. You're okay. I've got you." Her movements, clumsy when she was being watched by Barbara, suddenly became fluid and precise. She wrapped the bandage with a speed and symmetry that was almost mechanical. Tight, efficient, perfect. Military-grade field dressing. Mike looked down at his hand, blinking in surprise. "Damn, nurse, that was fast. You done this before?" Letitia blinked, seemingly snapping out of a trance. She hunched her shoulders again, returning to the mousy rookie persona. Oh, a little in nursing school. Just practice. She scurried away before he could ask anything else. Back at the nurse's station, the radio crackled to life. The static hiss signaled an incoming ambulance. St. Michael's Base, this is Medic 42. We are inbound. ETA 3 minutes. We have a high-value military transfer from Joint Base Maguire. Male, approximately 40 years old. Critical condition. Multiple GSWs to the chest and abdomen. BP dropping. This is a code black. Repeat, code black. Barbara rolled her eyes and keyed the mic. Copy, 42. Drop him in Trauma Bay 1. Probably just another gang shooting from Irvington. She looked at Letitia. Decker, take Bay 1. Prep the crash cart and try not to let him vomit on you. If he gets rowdy, call security. Don't try to be a hero. Yes, ma'am, Letitia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. If only Barbara knew. Heroism was the last thing on Letitia's mind. She just wanted to survive the shift without a panic attack. But the universe, as it often does, had other plans. The man in the ambulance wasn't just another gang member. And he wasn't just critical. He was dying. And his arrival would crack open the carefully constructed shell Letitia Decker had built around herself. Because the man on that stretcher knew her. Or at least, he knew who she used to be. The sliding doors of the ambulance bay hissed open, letting in a gust of rain and the smell of wet asphalt and diesel exhaust. The paramedics of Medic 42 didn't just wheel the stretcher in. They looked like they were fleeing a war zone. Clear the way, one paramedic shouted, his face pale and slick with sweat. We lost his pulse twice in the bird. He's coding again. Dr. Thorne stepped up, his ego swelling to fill the room. I've got this. Clear the way. Get 2 large bore IVs in him. Type and cross-match for O negative, stat. Someone page the OR and tell them we're coming in hot. But it was the 2 men flanking the stretcher that made Letitia's blood freeze in her veins. They weren't paramedics. They were operators. Black 5.11 tactical pants, Under Armour compression shirts, earpieces coiled down into their collars, Glock 19s barely concealed under their jackets. One of them, a bearded giant with a scar running down his neck like a lightning bolt, grabbed Dr. Thorne's scrub sleeve with a grip that could crush bone. Doc, the man growled, his voice like gravel in a blender. You listen to me real careful. This is Commander Marcus Hayes. Navy SEAL Team 6. You lose him, and there's no hole deep enough on this planet for you to hide in. Are we clear? Thorne yanked his arm away, his face flushing red. Get these men out of my trauma bay. I'm trying to save a life here. Security. 2 hospital security guards, overweight, underpaid, undertrained, ushered the operators out into the hallway. But the tension remained thick enough to choke on. On the table, Commander Marcus Breaker Hayes was fading fast. The cardiac monitor screamed, a flat, dissonant tone that made everyone's stomach drop. He's coding. Nurse Camille screamed, her voice cracking. V-fib. Get the paddles. Charge to 200, Thorne yelled, grabbing the defibrillator paddles. Clear. Thump. Nothing. The flatline continued its death song. Charge to 300. Clear. Thump. Still nothing. Come on, damn it. Thorne was sweating now, his confident surgeon mask cracking like cheap plaster. The damage was too extensive. There was arterial spray hitting the floor tiles every time they did chest compressions. Blood pooled under the table, spreading like a crimson lake. Where's the bleeder? I can't see anything through this mess. In the corner of Trauma Bay 1, unnoticed and invisible as always, Letitia Decker had slipped in. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was supposed to be prepping the crash cart in the hallway. But she was watching the monitor. And she was watching the blood flow. She saw what Thorne missed. The femoral artery. Ruptured. hidden under the massive hematoma in Hayes's left thigh. If someone didn't clamp it in the next 90 seconds, Commander Hayes would bleed out on the table. Letitia's hands stopped trembling. Her breathing slowed. The noise of the trauma bay, the alarms, the shouting, the chaos, faded into a distant hum. She was back in Fallujah, back in the sand, back in the war. And in war, hesitation kills. Letitia moved. She didn't ask permission. She didn't announce herself. She just moved, fast, fluid, like a shadow cutting through smoke. She shoved Dr. Thorne aside with her shoulder, ignoring his startled yelp of protest. She plunged her bare hand, no gloves, no hesitation, directly into the gaping wound in Hayes's thigh. "What the hell are you?" Thorne started. "Vascular clamp. Now." Letitia's voice was different. It wasn't the timid whisper of the scared rookie nurse. It was command. Pure. Cold. Absolute. Thorne froze, his mouth hanging open. "Clamp. Now." Letitia didn't yell. She didn't need to. The authority in her voice was like a physical force. Camille, the senior trauma nurse, reacted on instinct. She slapped a vascular clamp into Letitia's free hand. Letitia's fingers, slick with blood, found the torn artery. She clamped it. The arterial spray stopped instantly. Suture kit. 320 Proline. Curved needle. Camille handed it over, her eyes wide with shock. Letitia sutured the femoral artery in 90 seconds flat. Her hands moved with mechanical precision. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Tie. Cut. Tie. Cut. Perfect surgical knots that would hold under pressure. The cardiac monitor beeped. Once. Twice. A rhythm. "We have sinus rhythm." Camille shouted. "BP is rising. He's stabilizing." Letitia pulled her blood-soaked hands out of the wound, stepped back, and walked out of the trauma bay without a word. Dr. Thorne stood there, frozen, staring at the monitor. Then at his hands. Then at the door where Letitia had disappeared. "What?" he whispered. "What the hell just happened?" Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Letitia locked herself in the women's locker room. Her hands were shaking again, not from fear, but from adrenaline crashing through her system like a freight train. She turned on the sink and watched Commander Hayes's blood swirl down the drain, dark and thick. She looked up at the mirror. The woman staring back at her wasn't Letitia Decker, the timid nurse. It was someone else. Someone she thought she'd buried 3 years ago. It was Angel. The flashback hit her like a sledgehammer. Fallujah, Iraq, 2017. Letitia is kneeling in the sand, covered in blood that isn't hers. A young soldier, Private First Class Danny Rodriguez, 19 years old, from El Paso, Texas, is dying in her arms. His femoral artery is severed. There's an IED crater 10 feet away, still smoking. Gunfire echoes in the distance. Screams in Arabic. "Angel, we need to move now." Her commanding officer, Captain Reeves, is yelling. "We're sitting ducks out here." "He dies if I stop," Letitia says, her voice cold as ice. Her hands are inside Rodriguez's thigh, clamping the artery with her fingers while she fumbles for her field suture kit. "Angel, I said he dies if I stop." She finishes the suture. Rodriguez's pulse stabilizes. She hauls him onto her back in a fireman's carry and runs, 50 yards across open ground while bullets kick up sand around her boots. She gets him to the Humvee. He lives. Later, Captain Reeves puts her in for a Silver Star. Later, she kills 6 insurgents with her M9 Beretta while performing CPR on a sergeant whose heart stopped from blood loss. Later, she earns the call sign Angel. Because on the battlefield, she decides who lives and who dies. Letitia blinked. She was back in the locker room. Her reflection stared back at her, hollow-eyed and haunted. She dried her hands and walked back into the hallway. The hospital was quiet again. Routine. But something was wrong. Letitia could feel it, a prickling sensation at the base of her skull. The same feeling she used to get in Mosul right before an ambush. Two men in black suits were standing near the ICU where Commander Hayes had been moved. They weren't the operators from earlier. These men were different. Cleaner. Colder. Federal agents, maybe. Or something worse. One of them, a tall black man with a scar on his neck, saw Letitia and walked toward her. "You the nurse who saved Commander Hayes?" he asked. His voice was deep, measured. Letitia lowered her eyes. "I just did my job." The man studied her for a long moment. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "What's your name?" "Letitia Decker." "Decker." He frowned. "Where'd you serve?" Letitia's heart stopped. I don't know what you..." "Cut the crap, nurse." The man leaned in close. "Nobody, and I mean nobody, clamps and sutures a femoral artery in 90 seconds without advanced combat medical training. So I'll ask you again. Where did you serve?" Letitia's jaw tightened. "I'm just a nurse." The man stared at her for another beat, then nodded slowly. "Aha. Well, just a nurse. The commander wants to thank you personally when he wakes up. You saved his life." He handed her a business card. It was blank except for a phone number. "If you remember where you served," he said quietly, "give me a call. We could use someone like you." He walked away. Letitia looked at the card, then crumpled it and shoved it into her scrub pocket. She didn't want to be found. She didn't want to be Angel again. But deep down, she knew the truth. You can't bury the past. It always comes back. And tonight, it was coming back with a vengeance. At 4:17 a.m., the hospital's main power grid flickered. Once. Twice. Then the lights went out completely. Emergency generators kicked in after 3 seconds of total darkness, bathing the hallways in dim red emergency lighting. Alarms blared. Patients stirred in their beds, confused and frightened. "What the hell?" Barbara muttered, grabbing the phone at the nurses' station. "Maintenance. This is 4 North. We just lost main power. What's going on down there?" No answer. She tried again. "Maintenance. Security. Static." Letitia felt the prickling sensation again, stronger this time. Her instincts were screaming at her. Something was very, very wrong. Then she heard it. Gunfire. 3 sharp cracks echoing up from the ground floor. Then screaming. Barbara dropped the phone. "Oh my God. Oh my God, is that..." The elevator at the end of the hall dinged. The doors slid open. 6 men stepped out. They wore black tactical gear, balaclavas, and carried AR-15 rifles with suppressors. They moved with fluid, professional precision, stacked formation, weapons up, scanning for threats. Terrorists. Or mercenaries. Either way, they were here to kill. The lead man raised his rifle and fired a 3-round burst into the ceiling. Plaster and dust rained down. "Everybody on the ground. Now." Nurses screamed. Patients scrambled out of their beds. Dr. Thorne, who had been reviewing charts at the nurses' station, froze like a deer in headlights. "I said get down." The lead terrorist fired another burst, this time into a computer monitor. It exploded in a shower of sparks. Everyone dropped to the floor. Everyone except Letitia. She was already moving. While the terrorist's attention was on the crowd, Letitia slipped backward into the supply closet, silent as a ghost. She pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a crack to see through. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady now. The fear was gone. In its place was something cold and sharp. Training. She assessed the situation in seconds. 6 hostiles. AR-15s, likely fully automatic. Body armor. Comms in their ears. Professional. Coordinated. This wasn't a random attack. This was a hit. They were here for Commander Hayes. The lead terrorist grabbed Dr. Thorne by his scrubs and hauled him to his feet. "Where is he? Where's the SEAL?" Thorne stammered. I don't know what you're. The terrorist slammed the butt of his rifle into Thorne's stomach. Thorne collapsed, gasping for air. "ICU. Room 12, Barbara blurted out, her voice shaking. "Please, don't hurt anyone. He's in ICU room 12. "Smart lady." The lead terrorist gestured to two of his men. "Ramirez, Chen, secure the target. Kill him and anyone guarding him. The rest of you, round up the hostages. We're on a clock." Two terrorists peeled off toward the ICU. Letitia's mind raced. Hayes was unconscious, defenseless. The two operators who had brought him in were probably already dead. If those terrorists reached him, he'd be executed in his hospital bed. She had two choices. Stay hidden. Stay safe. Let them kill Hayes and probably everyone else when the FBI arrived. Or become Angel again. Letitia closed her eyes. She saw Danny Rodriguez's face. She saw Captain Reeves. She saw all the soldiers she'd saved. All the ones she couldn't. She opened her eyes. The choice was already made. Letitia Decker, the timid nurse, died in that supply closet. Angel was born again. She scanned the shelves. Scalpels. Syringes. Surgical scissors. A bottle of succinylcholine, a paralytic used for intubations. A bottle of potassium chloride, lethal in high doses. She grabbed what she needed and slipped out of the closet, moving through the shadows like smoke. The hunt had begun. The two terrorists, Ramirez and Chen, moved down the ICU hallway in tactical formation. Ramirez took point, his AR-15 sweeping left and right. Chen covered the rear. They didn't see the shadow detach itself from the ceiling tiles above them. Letitia had climbed into the drop ceiling through an access panel in the supply closet. She moved silently across the metal framework, following the terrorists from above. When they passed under her, she dropped. She landed on Chen's back, wrapping her legs around his torso and driving a scalpel into the gap between his helmet and body armor, the soft tissue at the base of his skull. The blade severed his spinal cord. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, dead before he hit the floor. Ramirez spun around, but Letitia was already moving. She rolled off Chen's body, grabbed his rifle, and fired a 3-round burst into Ramirez's knee. He screamed and collapsed. Letitia was on him in a second. She ripped his rifle away and jammed a syringe into his neck, succinylcholine. His muscles seized. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. He could only watch as Letitia leaned close and whispered, "You came to the wrong hospital." She left him there, paralyzed and suffocating, and moved toward ICU room 12. Commander Hayes was still unconscious, hooked up to monitors and 4 drips. Letitia checked his vitals. Stable. She grabbed his chart and scribbled a quick note. "Stay down. Play dead. Trust me." She heard footsteps. The other 4 terrorists were coming. Letitia grabbed Chen's AR-15, checked the magazine, 23 rounds, and took position behind the nurse's station. The lead terrorist's voice crackled over the radio. "Ramirez, Chin, status?" Silence. "Ramirez, do you copy?" More silence. "Shit. Something's wrong. All units, converge on ICU. We have a hostile." Letitia smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Come and get me," she whispered. The 4 terrorists entered the ICU in a diamond formation, weapons raised. They found Ramirez first, still paralyzed, his eyes wide with terror. "What the hell?" Letitia opened fire. She didn't spray and pray. She fired controlled bursts, 2 rounds per target, center mass. 1 terrorist dropped immediately. The other 3 scattered, taking cover behind gurneys and medical equipment. "Contact. We have contact. Hostile is armed." They returned fire. Bullets chewed up the nurse's station, sending splinters of wood and plastic flying. Letitia stayed low, counting rounds. 12, 15, 18. They were wasting ammo, firing blind. She waited for the pause, the moment when they had to reload. There. Letitia popped up and fired. Another terrorist went down, clutching his throat. 2 left. The lead terrorist pulled a flashbang from his vest. Frag out. The grenade skittered across the floor. Letitia didn't run. She grabbed a crash cart, a heavy steel cart loaded with medical equipment, and shoved it over the grenade. Bang. The explosion was muffled by the cart, but the concussion still rattled Letitia's teeth. Her ears rang. Her vision swam. But she didn't stop. She rolled to the side, came up firing, and put 2 rounds into the lead terrorist's chest. His body armor stopped the bullets, but the impact knocked him backward. 1 left. The last terrorist panicked. He dropped his rifle and pulled a pistol, firing wildly. Letitia didn't flinch. She walked toward him, calm and cold, firing with surgical precision. Click. Her rifle was empty. The terrorist grinned. Got you now, bitch. Letitia dropped the rifle and pulled a syringe from her pocket. Potassium chloride. The terrorist fired. Letitia twisted, letting the bullet graze her shoulder. Pain flared, but she ignored it. She closed the distance in 2 steps and jammed the syringe into his neck, depressing the plunger. Potassium chloride floods the heart. Cardiac arrest in seconds. The terrorist's eyes went wide. He clutched his chest, gasping, and collapsed. Letitia stood over him, breathing hard, blood dripping from her shoulder. Silence. 6 terrorists. 6 bodies. She looked at her hands. They were covered in blood again. Behind her, Commander Hayes's eyes fluttered open. He looked at Letitia, really looked at her, and his eyes widened in recognition. Angel, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Is that really you? Letitia didn't answer. Because outside, she could hear sirens. The FBI's hostage rescue team was arriving. But the battle was already over. The FBI's hostage rescue team breached St. Michael's Medical Center at 5:03 a.m., 46 minutes after the terrorists had entered the building. They found 6 dead hostiles, 0 dead hostages, and 1 very confused hospital staff. And they found Letitia Decker sitting on the floor of the ICU, her back against the wall, her shoulder bandaged with gauze and surgical tape. She was staring at nothing, her eyes hollow. Commander Hayes was awake now, sitting up in his hospital bed despite the protests of the nurses. When the FBI agents entered, he pointed at Letitia. That woman, Hayes said, his voice strong despite his injuries, saved my life. Twice. And she took out 6 armed hostiles by herself. You want to know who she is? She's a goddamn hero. The lead FBI agent, a stern woman named Agent Carver, looked at Letitia. Is that true, Ms. Decker? Letitia didn't answer. Agent Carver crouched down in front of her. Ms. Decker, I need you to answer some questions. How did you? She's Angel. The voice came from the doorway. It was the SCAD operator from earlier, the one who had given Letitia the business card. He walked into the room, holding up a tablet. Letitia Decker, former 68W Combat Medic Specialist, U.S. Army. 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Silver Star recipient. Call sign, Angel. She was discharged in 2020 with PTSD and disappeared. Until tonight. Agent Carver stood up. Is this true? Letitia finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, but there was steel in them now. Yes. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I didn't want to be found. Agent Carver studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Well, Ms. Decker, you just saved 43 lives tonight. The terrorists were planning to execute everyone in this hospital and blow the building. You stopped them. Letitia didn't feel like a hero. She felt exhausted. Dr. Thorne appeared in the doorway, his face pale. He looked at Letitia, then at the bodies being carried out in black bags. He stammered. I owe you an apology. I called you weak. I called you incompetent. I was wrong. Letitia stood up, wincing as pain flared in her shoulder. She walked past Thorne without a word. Barbara, the head nurse, was waiting in the hallway. Her eyes were red from crying. Letitia, I'm so sorry. I treated you terribly. I didn't know. You didn't need to know, Letitia said quietly. You just needed to treat me with respect. She walked away. Outside, the sun was rising over Newark. The rain had stopped. The parking lot was filled with police cars, ambulances, and news vans. Letitia sat on the curb, watching the chaos. Commander Hayes limped out of the hospital on crutches, flanked by the two operators. He sat down next to Letitia. You saved my life, Hayes said. Again. Just doing my job, Letitia replied. Bullshit. Hayes smiled. You're a warrior, Angel. You always were. Letitia looked at him. I'm not Angel anymore. I'm just a nurse. Hayes shook his head. You can't bury who you are, Letitia. Tonight proved that. The question is, what are you going to do now? Letitia didn't answer. Because she didn't know. 3 days later, Letitia returned to St. Michael's for her shift. She expected whispers, stares, maybe even fear. Instead, she found respect. Dr. Thorne nodded to her in the hallway. Barbara offered her a coffee. The other nurses smiled. And in the break room, someone had taped a photo to the wall, a blurry security camera image of Letitia standing in the ICU, holding a rifle, surrounded by smoke. Underneath, someone had written in Sharpie, Angel. Letitia stared at the photo for a long moment. Then she smiled. Maybe she couldn't bury the past. Maybe she didn't need to. Because the world needed heroes. And sometimes, heroes looked like quiet, invisible nurses who trembled when they changed 4 bags. Until the moment they didn't. Commander Hayes had left her a voicemail that morning. Angel, we're forming a new task force. Medical and tactical. Off the books. No red tape. Just the mission. If you're interested, call me. Letitia listened to the message 3 times. Then she deleted it. Or did she? 2 weeks later, Letitia Decker resigned from St. Michael's Medical Center. She left no forwarding address. Some say she went back to the military. Some say she disappeared again. But if you ask Commander Hayes, he'll just smile and say, Angels don't retire. They just wait for the next person who needs saving. And somewhere, in a hospital or a battlefield or a dark alley where evil thinks it can win, Letitia Decker is waiting. Because she's not just a nurse. She's Angel. And she decides who lives and who dies.